Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Saturday morning, or evening, or afternoon, or well into Sunday, depending on the world, depending where you are in the world. But as always, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you joining us and making us part of your day. Thank you so much, as always, for your support, for all your likes, shares, and follows. Thank you so much for listening to our amazing episodes, and of course, getting to learn from amazing educators, creators from all around the world, where you can go ahead and take a little bit of something and sprinkle it on to what you are already doing great. And I am really excited about this morning because we are going to talk research. And I know you may be thinking, it's like, wait a minute, that's a little bit misspelled. Well, you'll hear why. It's called
Yeah.
Let's Talk Research, because I'm really excited to be joined by an amazing guest who I have been following for a while now in the TikTok space. And the ability that he has to garner interest in the topics, because he deals with research and education. And for many of us that are in education, we definitely need to hear or have a place where we can amplify our voices and share our thoughts and ideas. And Eric has done that on TikTok and taken it to a whole other level. So without further ado, Eric, how are you this morning?
Excellent. Fantastic. The kids have been a little wild this morning because they're like, oh, we have to be quiet soon. So it's like, run around and scream time. And right now they're on the other end of the house, and um, we're having a
No,
good
but
time.
that's wonderful,
It's
and it's okay. And don't worry, I have had appearances where we've had the kids hop on, we've had the dogs
Yep.
hop on, and everything. But like I always tell all our viewers and whoever will be listening, I say, hey, you know what? Tech happens. This is real life.
Yep.
It's a genuine, authentic conversation, and I'm really excited to dive in deep. So, Eric, for all our audience members that are watching us live or are going to catch this on the replay, give us a little brief introduction and your context within the education space, please.
Yeah. So I'm currently working towards my PhD in curriculum studies at DePaul University. I actually I'm for those who are familiar with the PhD sort of process, I'm like 3 courses away from being what we call ABD, all but dissertation. Um, and so then it's going to be all dissertation all day for the next year. Hopefully, keeping that in mind, I'd like to think in about a year and a half I may be defending. That's the goal anyway. Um, and so while I have been doing my coursework, I am one of those people, I don't resonate with just information that's given to me. I have to make use of it. I have to put it into practice. And so when I was engaged with a education in the community and community building course at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, look, what are we doing as higher ed and as researchers to support educators out in the field who are suddenly having to completely improvise everything that they're doing? And I looked around, and a lot of people are like, "Yeah, that's cool, but our everything's on fire over here." And what's your idea? And a friend of mine was like, "Hey, have you been on TikTok?" And I was like, "No." And so I got on for a minute, and I was like, "Oh, some people are talking about some real stuff here." And I was like, "Oh," and I see that there's actually a lot of students on here. I see that there's a lot of teachers on here. And so in the early spring of 2021, we created Let's Talk Ed Research. And that was started purely as this community outreach project, as a, hey, let's make education research and researchers accessible to sort of the general public and join in sort of the public discourse around what's going on in this absolutely insane time of education. Um,
Absolutely.
but before that, before the PhD life and stuff, I was substitute teaching. I've been substitute teaching for about 20 years now in some capacity, but I've also taught summer programs. I teach with the Center for Talent Development at Northwestern, which is a gifted enrichment program. And my origin background is kind of in theater, which I then brought into the education space and has kind of it over time showed me that like, oh wait, there's something here that I'm getting that a lot of educators have not. So let me help bring that out into the space.
Oh, that's great. And again, I'm a late bloomer or just late getting onto TikTok as well, but once same thing, started seeing, educators and creators and, in the education space just talking about all these real issues, and it's really helped me, again, better equip myself, better see what's out there, see what at least minimal incremental changes we can make at least within myself and my practice to bring
Hmm.
into and share with obviously within our district, and through the podcast and this platform to be able to bring it out to many others that may not
Yeah.
have access to information, which we'll talk a little bit about what we talked earlier about access to information as we get more into your background. But again, as always, one of my favorite parts for all our guests and audience members, is that superhero origin story. And like I tell everybody, all my guests that are here are people that I have seen do some amazing work within the education space and are kind of like likened to a superhero. I Every superhero has an origin story, and I know you talked to us just briefly a little bit there, but my question to you is, as you lead up a little bit more into your origin story, was is or was education your main line as far as, yes, this is what I want to do and I want to dedicate my life to, or did that come later in life?
Uh, Consciously, no. Subconsciously, always. No and yes. It's actually both of those because I grew up and was in theater. I quite literally grew up backstage. My mom was choreographer. My dad was an artistic director. I was in shows as a kid, and I was definitely incredibly passionate about it. But something that I picked up very early on, in particular from my parents, who would also teach on the side, because I don't know if you know this, but the theater life is not exactly financially liquid. You know, it's not an area you go into for the bucks, for the money, much like education. But so my parents would teach on the side and what have you. And something I really internalized very early on about theater and performance and everything is that all art is a form of communication. And to me, if that communication doesn't have something new to share, something to teach, something to explore with one's audience and fellow performers, then I don't really have much use for it. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. Like so much of our entertainment is kind of this stuff that doesn't have any real depth or meaning. And believe me, I just as much as another person love something that's just fluffy, that just, is there to like make me laugh for a second and move on and doesn't really change me in any way. But that's not the kind of art I ever wanted to create. So even when I was full time, like I'm a theater artist, this is what I'm doing, I always wanted to do theater that was educational. I wanted to do something that was going to teach the audience and teach myself and the people I'm working with something that it new and with greater nuance than I had before. So when I got out of college, like fresh out of college, like within I stayed with my parents for the summer. Actually, no, I didn't. Sorry. I got out of college. I worked at a teaching, I taught as an education intern for Lexington Children's Theater in Lexington, Kentucky. Shout out to them. And met a really cute girl there who 22 years later is my wife, and we have two beautiful kids. So that worked out really well. Um, and then I went and stayed with my parents for a little while I was figuring out what was going to happen next. And there was a high school that was literally down the street from them. And I was like, look, I can go substitute teach there because you just needed to have a college degree in order to get subbing license. So I'm teaching down at the high school, and I took over for like 2 weeks for one of the teachers who went on kind of a class trip thing. So I had kind of a smaller group of kids that were kind of weren't involved with whatever the event was, and we were just diving into biology, something I hadn't really studied real hard but was familiar with, and I was like, well, let's figure this out together, right? and we had a great time. And I noticed very quickly that some of the assignments that we had, worksheets and stuff, those weren't resonating. The kids looked at those worksheets and went, no, this is dumb. I don't get it. What do you want? Right. And then the other part was this assignment where they were going to present parts of the textbook to each other. Right. And I noticed that when they did that, they were really good at saying, oh, the textbook says X, Y, and Z. And there you go. And I was like, okay, great, but what does that mean? And they're like, what? I'm like, no, but so you just presented that, but like, can you sort of explain that more? Can we? Oh no, we don't actually know what we just said. Oh well, let's figure that out. Let's fix it. So this is me just going, oh, how can I make sure that we're learning the things that have been assigned? To bring a relatively long story shorter, I'm moving on to other classes and stuff, and the biology teacher comes back and is tracks me down in the hallway, and she's like, "What did you do?" I'm like, "What? Ooh, what did you do? So and so got an A on the quiz." Yeah, he's a smart kid. No, you don't understand. This kid hasn't done anything for me all year. He's a D student. I've been begging him to make an effort and to do stuff and to actually learn this stuff. What did you do? And I had no idea how to respond to that at the time. I didn't have the language, right? Because this is me at 22, right? Just out of school, having just gotten an undergrad in theater. And I'm sitting there going, well, I noticed he wasn't resonating with the worksheets and stuff. So we kind of threw away the worksheets. Is that okay? I put it in my notes that we kind of did something different. And I listened to him and we talked about like what was going on. And we figured out that, he wasn't resonating with what was going on because he didn't understand kind of background. So we figured that out and we kind of went on from there. And we just, decided to work together on what was going on and to figure it out. Do you not do that? Like, and it was this moment that then, and I have to say, I tell this story relatively often, but the thing is, it's not just this one story. This happened over and over and over again over the course of 10 years of me subbing in lots of schools, in private schools, in charter schools, in public schools, in inner city Baltimore public schools, in Houston, all these different places. I kept running into these instances where I would come in and I'd just be like, hey, let's figure this out together. And I had no problem noticing and seeing when the lesson plan, when the intended script wasn't working for us and going, well, screw that. Let's try and figure out where we're trying to go together. And seeing that resonate, particularly with kids with neurodiversity and what have you. And that then led me towards figuring out, oh, wait, I'm connecting with these kids whose needs are not being met, who are incredibly bright, but also may have some co-occurring issue going on that, even without necessarily knowing that, I would just kind of sink in. And later I discovered that was what we call twice exceptionality. And that then was the thing that led me into be like, okay, I have to do this education thing full time.
That is awesome. As you were telling your story and talking about your experience as a substitute, I must say that sometimes I've gotten the question on this show. It's like, who has been the most influential teacher or person that you can remember? And I've had several, but no one has made a greater impact on me than a substitute teacher that I had when I was in ninth grade. And it was a ninth grade biology course. And very similar way, he came in, he was a former teacher, retired, gentleman, probably about like either 5'4", 5'5", coming in, glasses, little white hair, and just very, very, energetic for his age. And he would come in and sub, and Mr. Margot, who was my teacher at the time, would leave, and he, of course, leaving those handouts and packets. And we knew that when Mr. Rodriguez was coming in, we weren't doing any packets. He's like, nah, put that away. And one day we walked in, and on the chalkboard, because I'm dating myself here, we still had chalk. So we had chalkboard, and he wrote on the board, C. Hopkins Cafe. And if anybody ever asks, he goes, what is the thing that you remember most about high school? I said, C. Hopkins Cafe. And they're like, well, what is that? Well, Mr. Rodriguez said, okay, guys, today your lesson is just going to be on these elements that you all need to survive. And it's just C. Hopkins Cafe: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and I forgot the other one with the S, sometimes. But that to me was like, this is it, this is my style, this is my jam. And that really is all I remember from ninth grade biology. But it made an impact on me, and again,
Yeah.
because he was able to just reach out to us in a different way rather than the
Yeah.
handouts. It resonated with us. And it was about the way he made us feel. He
Hmm.
engaged us in conversation, and that to me was something that was very important. And so again, that's why it was my most memorable moment from my high school years. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your experience there, because we were talking a little bit about
Hmm.
pre-chat,
Yeah.
talking about it a little bit about pre-chat as far as your theater experience
Yeah.
and coming into the classroom. I mean, there is a sense of showmanship when you are a
Absolutely.
teacher, that you have to, I don't want to say like, be up there and like, I mean, entertain. I mean, but you're engaging. You have to
Hmm.
tell the story. You have to build the plot. You have to do all of that when you're doing your lesson. So let me ask you, how important was it for you when you made that transition into teaching to have had that experience and skill set, as you brought lessons to your students?
100%. Every time I will say that I learned more about the process, the practical aspects of teaching from my theater training. I've learned more from that than anything else in terms of formal even as a doctoral student. Like everything that I do, even within the doctoral lens, when I'm doing all this coursework and I'm going through education history, all of that still pales in comparison, or has in some way gone through the lens of what it means to be a collaborative storyteller and the collaborative process of engaging in an understanding of the world, right? And that's the key thing, is that particularly in live theater, everything is fundamentally collaborative. And what I found that I was bringing to the classroom, and it was really heartening. This is more than one that happened, but there's a particular teacher who I worked with. I ended up co-teaching, because I was subbing for the co-teacher of this, varsity level, dude who was like two. I actually he retired like 3 years after I worked with him. Um, this just amazing teacher who like was just a part of the firmament of the building. You know that teacher, though, like everybody in the building knows that dude, and even the students who aren't like fans respect. You know what I mean? And this guy just knew how to like meet the kids where they were and what have you. And so I'm co-teaching with him, and I'm, my very excitable self, but I also come in, going, what are we going to do? And understanding that I don't have all the answers from the very beginning, and that we have to co-create what's going to happen in class that day. And so again, even in his class, there was like, okay, well, we're going to go over this sort of worksheet about Romeo and Juliet, right? And we're going to talk about and the students are going to work on this. And so I sat down with this group of students who were like, I don't get it. I don't like this. This book is dumb. I don't understand any of this. And I'm looking at the questions like, well, actually, these questions you're getting, there's no wrong answer other than the one that you just refuse to give, right? And and so I immediately was like, okay, well, let's set that aside and let's just talk about like why it's not resonating. What's the issue? What's the barrier, etc. And then I was like, well, what? And I sat there and I was like, okay, well, I'm interested to know, because this is a story about teenage kids who have the hots for each other, and you seem to not think that that's familiar. And I look around at this high school every day, and I can tell you, I see this moment all the time of two kids who see each other and want to get into each other's pants. Like, you guys know this story through and through, and they're like, well, yeah, wait, that. I was like, okay, when they're talking about hands, did you think they were talking about hands? Yeah, no, they're not talking about hands. Not at all. Well, maybe a little. They're talking about what those hands could do. Oh, oh, yeah. And so we had this moment, and it was just it's one of my favorite things anytime working with it's one of the reasons I actually do think Romeo and Juliet belongs, because it's one of those things where it's like, it's actually really subversive, because Juliet has a lot more agency than she ever would at that time period. Anyway, getting back to this. So I'm talking with the teacher afterwards later, and he's like, man, it took me at least 3 years before I figured out how long have you been doing this? And I was like, well, I've been subbing for like, 5 years now, 10, 5 or 6 years now. Um, and he's like, yeah, but like, at what point did you learn to like just take the worksheet, throw it away, and go, what are we at? I was like, day one. I like that's just how you work. Like it's a Lotsie, right? And he was like, there you go, that's it. And he was just like, I wish more. And he told me, he's like, I wish more teachers came in already knowing that. And that's like, so you want another origin story? That's the origin story where like my dissertation work is around this idea of like, what can we do to help pre-service teachers come in going, I don't have all the answers. We're going to collaborate. And if the lesson plan that I have isn't working, I'll readily throw away part of it, because the main thing that matters is the kid in front of me, not the expectations of what I wanted to do today.
Excellent. Everything that you said really sums up my career in the classroom for 11 years. I didn't go through the traditional education background. I actually came from business into education.
Mm,
And I always tell people, to me, and of course, being in this world now, doing my doctorate, actually, we're probably like, we're at the same, like, you need 3 more
yeah,
classes. I need 3 more classes before we start
yeah.
writing like the wind. But, what helped me, and I still go back to it. I said, for myself, I wish that my education program that I'm going through here, that I did my master's in EdTech and now done my doctorate, they always kind of ask us surveys and say, well, what could we better do to help pre-service teachers? And one of my things has always been, give them a marketing class, marketing 101, know your
Hmm.
customer. And that was what helped me the most, transitioning in, knowing that I have 29 different customers that I have to sell algebra to, and not every customer is going to buy it in the exact same way, and I have to cater to their needs, because some may want 8 cup holders, some may want 5, some may want no cup holders at all and really don't care. But you have to know your audience. And so, going back to that, I like one
Uh-oh.
comment. Also, I would like to welcome here to the chat who put this in here. It says, improv is also that way. You must listen and respond to
Yeah,
your audience. So, like, you're speaking here, knowing your students, see what response you're getting from them, engaging them to either give you more and then giving them back what they're asking for, and in just a very organic way, in that storytelling
yeah.
mode that we were talking about earlier, which is so very important. So
And they just
let's
put the finger, they really just put the finger on it. And I feel a little bad because early on I'd be like, well, we need to teach improv to pre-service teachers. And the problem with that is that when I say that word, people don't think of it that way. And I was actually going to point out, I love that you mentioned marketing, because marketing gets a bad rap. It really does. There is this assumption that understanding and that business and marketing is about getting one over on somebody. And that's not it. That, yes, it can be that, but that's not what it's really about. At the end of the day, a good salesperson is genuinely trying to help the customer get the thing that they want and need, right? And sometimes, and oftentimes even, it is about teaching the customer what they need, even if they came in wanting something different, because as you talk to them, you find out what the role of the product is going to be, and you go, this is actually the thing you came in to buy. That's actually not the thing that's going to be right for you. And the problem is that, thanks to business, it's so often turned into, how can I upsell? And that's a problem, and I think that actually, I think that mirrors well over to education. I would say that mirrors in many ways the, how can I make this teachable to the test? How can I make sure that these kids are going to perform well on this? To me, that's the upsell, because then it becomes about, how can I make them know a thing and repeat it, which is not the same thing as, it's mistaking what they need. Like, we believe that the kids need to perform well on tests. And there is a certain reality to that, don't get me wrong. But we then become blind to the foundational need of of understanding how to interact with new information, how to interact with people who have something to share with you, and how to co-create something meaningful, because in that is agency. And that's the thing is, I think people seem to see the individual and other people as separate, and from my perspective, those things are interlocked. You can't just be an individual. You are going to be a person inside it, because we don't learn without other people. Like all knowledge, all learning, all development, arguably, if we go from like a Vygotskian direction to get all, PhD on you. I really love kind of the Vygotsky point of view that all development moving forward and becoming and growing is socially moderated, but the individual is the one who creates value. And then we get into Ikeda and value creation ideas and stuff. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I love that comment, and that they put their finger in it. Absolutely, it is
Yeah.
improv. And that's the thing is, through my theater training, I was taught to really internalize that sense of, hey, uh, I really love to internalize that sense of coming in of like, we are here to co-create something. And it is my job to say yes. It is my job to validate the student who's in front of me, instead of trying to force them into the model of my expectation.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. That is awesome, Eric. I love the way that you put that. And again, it just speaks so much to my experience. I mean, it's interesting how we come from two different worlds, yet we did the same thing. It was called different. I mean, I'm coming from business, you're coming in from theater. And then, of course, now I'm understanding what we were doing. And I often joke around with people. I say, look, I was doing personalized learning back in 2005 before it became a huge buzzword
Right.
thanks to marketing, but it's the concept is there. Now I know there's a name to it because I didn't go through that education or
Mm-hmm.
traditional route. But now, like I said, I find that value. And incidentally, as you're talking about this, I always tell people, they ask me, it's like, what has helped you, or what would you say has been your most successful, I guess, skills or traits that you have to be in the classroom? I said, for me, it's always been improvise, adapt, and overcome. Those
Yep.
three words have helped me be successful pretty much in anything as I transition from classroom now to instructional technology, and in anything, even in doctoral studies. And all of that is just being able to improvise when you're meeting with somebody, knowing what it is that they need, how you're going to co-create, improvise, overcoming that barrier when you need to get something done. And then, adaptability, being able to adapt, to what is happening. And
Yeah.
really, that's really helped me out a lot. So let's transition now into your TikTok platform. So I want to ask
Yeah.
you, like, tell us a little bit more. I know you kind of hit a little bit on it, and as the conversation goes, we kind of get an idea. But I want to know a bit more about the mission. What is the mission
Mhm.
of Let's Talk Ed Research, and how has it evolved from when it
Oh
first
man.
started?
Yeah. So I mean, to I'll go ahead and start at the beginning. The beginning was, hey, let's just try to make higher education accessible. To simply to come down from the ivory tower. And I think the thing is like, the majority of people in higher ed do not see themselves or want to be kept to the ivory tower. They desperately want to see themselves as relevant and engaged with what's going on in the world. They really do. But the thing is our institutions, our structures, our systems create those barriers between town and gown, right? There are whole papers about, the separation of town and gown, and what communities and what universities have done to try to bridge that gap, right? And there's been some success out there. I mean, you can just do a quick Google Scholar search for town and gown studies and research and stuff. You'll find lots of stuff along those lines. So that was kind of the inspiration of like, well, let me come out here and like, and I also, because particularly in the public dialogue sphere and discussion, there is a tendency for even very well-meaning people to kind of come away with the wrong idea, or to state something as if it were fact without any sort of research for it, without any sort of evidence, and to have that kind of take off. On the same tone, you have people who are saying things that are actually completely accurate, completely true, who don't even know that there is evidence that they could be drawing upon to support. And so, kind of an initial idea there was to kind of come into those conversations and to be able to, when somebody says something completely asinine, to say, I'm sorry, there's really no research to support that. And by the way, here's all this research that says differently, right? I mean, one of the biggest ones, and this is one that I'm going to be doing a post on today, is issues around trans identity of pronouns and stuff. There is zero, absolutely no evidence that I've ever come across that honoring a person's identity, whatever that may be, does harm. There is ample research that shows that uplifts and supports and encourages students to do better. And the simple act of just acknowledging the identity of a student who comes into your class and says, these are my pronouns, this is the name that I go by, works wonders. And in fact, we have research that shows that to deny that causes harm to children. And I'm not okay with that. So anytime somebody comes in with some sort of statement of like, oh, they're harming children by acknowledging that trans people exist, or that there are families other than heteronormative nuclear family structures, that somehow that is harmful to children, we have ample evidence that shows the exact opposite of that. So that's an example of that. And then on the other hand, you have people coming in and going, saying something to the effect of like, oh, well, when I teach, I think it's just really important to make sure that we're creating an inviting and inclusive atmosphere for all of our students, and that it's okay to create accommodations for them. And here's a couple of things that I do because I happen to have a student who struggled with this. What do you think? To which I can then go, hey, look, by the way, did you know there's a research paper that says, here's multiple research papers that say what you're doing is really efficacious and helpful, right? And so to be able to dive into the public dialogue in that way, and to kind of provide this sort of evidence-based approach to responding to the dialogue that's happening, was kind of a key thing to start with. And it's still there, still very much there. And then it kind of did, and then from there it evolved, because as things do, initially it started as me and Caitlin, my co-conspirator, Caitlin Meyer. However, while we were doing this, she got promoted into an admin position that takes all of her attention, and she's doing some incredibly amazing work. She's at a school that is literally taking in refugees right now. So needless to say, she's got enough on her plate going on. So you won't see her on the channel as much, but she is very much there, and she and I talk every week. We're doing coursework together and stuff. But as I was doing my coursework, I was like, well, why don't I share the things that I'm finding and learning about and talking about the coursework? And that also seemed to really resonate with people, of like, where they were like, oh, so I did qualitative research last year. And I was like, well, I'll share this process with people. And then during that, I was like, I should just do a qualitative study here on TikTok. So I did. And rather than doing a traditional journal logging, like as you want to research stuff, they're like, you have to have a journal, you have to record, you have to do all these things to make sure that you're recording, especially in qualitative, you want to be recording all your data. And I was like, then I'm just going to journal to TikTok. And so as I was doing my interviews, as I was going through my stuff, and I shared out my, I walked everybody through like, okay, here's the problem statement. Here's this, here's the methods. Here's the theory. Getting back to Vygotsky, I'm like, okay, here's kind of a Vygotskian lens through which I'm doing this phenomenal. Oh, by the way, here's what a phenomenological study is. and it's talking to people who are in it, in an event, in a thing, in a particular moment in time, and going, let's understand this moment in time better. And so, yeah, so I did that study on TikTok. You can go and look. I labeled them all. I hate that TikTok has not yet allowed me to create playlists. And I'm going to try and I'm starting to move those videos over to YouTube. I can say that here, right? I won't
Yeah.
lose. I'm moving. So we're also on YouTube now, sort of very small scale. We're going to be ramping that up soon. But yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know. I feel like I've rambled a little bit, but
No, but
hopefully
it's
arc of where we're
perfect.
at now.
No, but it's wonderful because I definitely want my audience members that are, going through programs, education programs, or even right now, because this is going to lead me to the next question. What I love that you're doing is that you are sharing, your methodology for somebody like myself who might be, working on their doctorate as well, or anybody that maybe just, learns a little bit different. And maybe I might say some of the professors might be a little dry, but seeing somebody that is in it and you explaining it, I was like, oh, that resonates with me. Oh, so that's what that is. That's all you had to tell me. And then I can take it from there. That's the one thing that I love. And we talked a little bit about this pre-chat as far as I often feel that now that I've been doing this coursework and when we do our
Mm,
research and we have to find papers, I'm lucky that because of my university, I have access to
yeah,
papers and databases and so on. But
yeah,
if I am just a teacher, I am a K-12 teacher, and I want to say, like, hey, what can I do different? What are the experts out there?
mhm,
What are the professors out there? What are these journals saying? And then I was like, I have to pay $50 to access this PDF,
right.
just to give me this. So my next question to you is, again, and we talked about this, but for you, what have been some of the biggest challenges in making education research accessible to people of all
Yeah.
backgrounds?
Yeah. Okay. So you touched on a key thing. Like, one of the first things that I do is, any research studies that I share, I actually make sure are publicly accessible. So which actually means that I have to, like, sort through stuff, and I have to go, like, is this something that people can access, right? The other part that I would say is also identifying people, because behind every paper, there's a person who is passionate enough to do the research and to write it up and put it into a paper because they care. Yes, video research is much more accessible and equitable, and actually, that's going to be part of. I've been arguing that I'm going to try and subvert some of that through my dissertation process. I'm going to make part of my literature review video based, and that's something I'll be talking about more on the. We would spend the rest of our time just talking about that, but I will be sharing more of that on as we go forward on TikTok, because honestly, once my coursework ends, I'm going to be recording and being holding myself accountable to my dissertation work, in part by continually updating the process and talking about it with people on TikTok, and hopefully being able to answer questions and have that enrich what I'm doing. Um, but one of the things that I do, like I said, there's so much that actually is publicly accessible. Believe it or not, there very much is. The other part is, um, if you find something that seems, if the abstracts give you a lot of information, they really do. So learning to read an abstract is really helpful, because you can get to an abstract of anything with a Google Scholar search. And actually, I understand, and this is something that maybe you know more about fonts than I do, is how ChatGPT is acting as a new search engine.
Mm.
That may even give you more to work with now. I'm about to stick my toes into that, and I'm wanting to learn about that. I think it's going to make a huge difference in my literature review process, because as a neurodivergent individual, who I am actually a good writer, but it is an incredibly laborious process. I'm a much better editor than I am a writer in a lot of ways, in part because just building something to begin with is very hard when I build anything from the ground up. But if I can take something and work with it, if I've got a LOTC, and anybody who doesn't know that term, oh, I love that term. It comes from dell'arte. The idea was that in Commedia dell'arte, they would have shows where they would have a known story that the actors all knew that they were going to do, but it didn't have all the lines. It only had the specific ones that had to be included in the scene, but the rest of the scene was improvised. Every time, every show. And so the Lazzi was what is a script that asks you and demands the actors to improvise whole cloth, lots of things. So when I say that word, that's how I want every lesson plan to be, or at least to treat every lesson plan as a Lazzi. But coming back to this, one of the big things I would say, and that is a key part of like me coming into TikTok, ed researchers don't see themselves as being in this ivory tower. In fact, many of them feel kind of lonely and desperately wish somebody cared as much about the things that they're talking about as they do. They are so welcoming. Here's what you do. You find an abstract for a paper you like. Like you just do, and again, a basic Google Scholar search will find you all kinds of stuff. You don't have to be an expert. The only sort of expertise that you learn is just over time you learn how to make better Boolean searches. That's really what it comes down to. But find the thing. If it's behind a paywall, contact the author. Reach out to them. They're almost all publicly listed. Now, here's another cool trick that I think is a trick that people don't know about Google Scholar. Once you find a paper, you can also find papers that cite that paper. And this is why it's actually really important and cool that in education, in research, that we always cite our sources, is because it creates this trail by which we can stand on by which you can see the shoulders of the giants that people are, but also you can see where people are moving forward. So if you find one article, especially if it's old, let's say it's from the 90s, and you're like, man, what about this? And how have I never heard of this before, right? And you're like, okay, but where is this now? Well, you look at cited, and you see who cited, it, and you can filter by year. You can see who cited it within the last 3 years. And then that will give you, and then you can go to that person, even if the original author is dead or not accessible, or we've lost, they've gone out of academia, they're no longer publicly listed, whatever, you can go find that person. And the thing is like, these people engaged in research will almost always get back to you in some fashion, and they'll give you a copy. Most of them have a copy of their own. They might even give you like an early draft, and they'll warn you. They're like, this is an earlier draft, but I think it covers most of the things. And so like, and the other big thing is librarians. Do you know that librarians are magic? They are pure effing magic. If you go to your local librarian, even your school librarian, or if you go to your public library and talk to the librarian, it might take time, but they'll find it. They will find a way. They will beg, borrow, and steal it on your behalf if you say, I would like this article. I hate that it's that much work, and I'd like things to be more accessible from the begin with. I do know that there are some sites, unfortunately, I don't use them enough to remember the names of them, that have democratized knowledge in certain ways. You might look up TikToks that are like, don't do this. Don't go to .ed, .com or .net and put in these words to find this article that's behind a paywall. So those things exist. And the thing is the author never gets paid for, they've already been, in fact, and this is something we talked about before the show, many article writers have been charged money by those journals to submit their article. So they're not only are they not getting paid for writing the article, but sometimes they are paying for getting that article published by that thing that's behind a paywall, which is complete nonsense. I will say that happens less in ed research and more in like hard sciences. But yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's something that I knew about up until I started my master's program. And then I was like, okay, we have to do research. And then now in doctoral studies, okay, research. And then I was like, wow, like I have to go and pay for this. And, I was like, no. And then absolutely, like you said, you learn those things where it's like, okay, let me see the abstract, let me see the works cited, and then just lead me from there. As a matter of fact, for this semester, for this course, what I need to do is for my dissertation, I need to search for an instrument and for my dissertation. And so that's my whole semester, is just searching for an instrument, because my prof is like, look, if you don't have to reinvent the wheel, don't reinvent the wheel, but get
Yeah.
in contact. And he goes, find something that is out there that might be feasible with your research, and reach out to the author and ask, like, hey, would it be possible to use this instrument that you already have and maybe make some slight tweaks for my study? And he said the exact same thing. He goes, you'd be surprised how helpful they
Yes.
will be, because you're looking for that, and they want to share. So I'm like
Yeah.
really excited about that.
I've never met a researcher that wanted things to be behind a paywall, right? I've never met anyone who didn't want people to read their work. And in fact, a really sad statistic that I've heard is that the majority of articles that are published, like literally the average is 3 people read them. And one of those is the editor of the journal, right? So like that means that maybe 1 or 2 people not directly involved with that article have actually read the article. And so that's the thing. Oh, the other thing I will say, almost all dissertations are freely accessible now. Almost all of them. So you can, if you can find the name of somebody who, especially if they're doing work now and it's recent or whatever, they will likely have cited themselves to some degree. They'll have cited their dissertation because they're going to be saying, well, such and such is a thing. Well, that was a finding of their dissertation, so they'll have cited that. Find people's dissertations. You don't have to read the whole darn thing. They're huge. But you can look at the abstract. You can look at the specific findings. You can look at the methodology section. You can look at specific parts of that dissertation to pull out the things that you want. And like you said, like actually I contacted um, someone that I know, a chair of a program at Northwestern, who I met with and sat down with, who actually was the one who put me on to doing a PhD. It just to kind of reconnect and also see what kind of connections he could make, because I was looking at different aspects of what I could do with my dissertation and who I might want to work with and stuff outside of DePaul. And he said, and I was describing he's like, my dissertation was actually really similar to yours. You should go look at it. And like, so I'm going to crib from his dissertation in terms of instrument structure,
Mhm.
etc., around building, because process wise and structurally, there's somebody, even if our particular viewpoints are different, which they have to be, because that's the thing that kills me about lit review, is trying to prove something that's not there,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if anybody knows this. The whole idea of a dissertation is that you're putting out something new in the world. As such, a huge part of your dissertation is writing about how what you're doing is new, which then means you have to say, well, I've been through all the literature and these are the only studies that I found, or these are the studies that are remotely similar, and let me tell you about how what I'm doing is different. And the problem is it is both in my case, it is both a benefit and a complete and soul crushing hindrance, that what I'm doing, nobody's really been doing. Nobody's been teaching improv to teachers in pre-service education. Nobody's been doing it. And so I have yet to find any of that. Now there's people who've talked about improv. There's plenty of stuff about teaching improv to kids, which is great. But I'm like, how much of that is the blind leading the blind? When it's like, hey, teacher, it's when they tell teachers, after the fact, that you know how to do a lesson plan, you know how to go to the curriculum pacing guide. Now differentiate. And the
Absolutely.
thing was, like, I took a class in differentiation, and the book that we read, half of it was spent telling me why differentiation is something I should do. And I'm sitting there going, My first day of teaching ever, I immediately went, well, how can I make sure everybody's here? How can I make this accessible? Like, and being willing and able to go, oh, this part of the lesson plan doesn't work for this person because clearly that's not a thing. Like, and yet, and then when you say the word differentiation to teachers, their eyes go on rotisserie. Anyway, I know we're getting away from what we were saying. Oh, thank you,
No,
Amanda. I love that Amanda's been commenting. I love it when I'm doing these things and people have something to interject.
yes. No,
Yes,
Amanda is great. Make sure she's on TikTok as well. I'm pretty sure she's already
awesome.
following you and she'll probably post something and everything. But Amanda is phenomenal and she's just a great person and just a great supporter of the show. She's here Saturdays and whenever it is that she can. So big shout out to Amanda for joining us today. But Eric, as we wind down, I mean, I really appreciate everything that you share today, your passion, obviously, of course, what you're doing with Let's Talk Ed Research on TikTok and opening up that discourse to share research and just really help put this information out there and getting different viewpoints and showing research and obviously in this way moving and whatever we can to move the education needle forward and everything. So I definitely love that. So thank you so much.
I want to
And
add one little thing onto
sure.
that specific thing. If there's one thing that anybody can take away from any of this about TikTok is my biggest finding as a researcher on TikTok who's literally presenting at conferences. I'll be presenting in Amsterdam, of all places, about my work on TikTok come this spring in April. The key finding that I have found is there is legitimate capital D academic word discourse happening in this space on TikTok. And if anyone tries to tell you that social media is the worst and useless and terrible, it is always going to be a double-edged sword. It is always going to have problems. It should not be your primary source of information. It is not a primary source. It is the but it is discourse. There are people who know what they're talking about, who are sharing very meaningful, very real information. And we need to honor that. And we cannot dismiss it as a inconsequential space. So if anybody who's watching this and is not already on TikTok, go lurk, follow me, follow people, follow anyone that I've ever reposted, follow anyone who's ever responded to me. TikTok is a space of real discourse that is entirely valid. If it's a format that doesn't fit for you, that's fine. My only thing is I'm very tired of this sort of Luddite, well, this is social media technology thing and it's for the kids, and it's not good. And, and only one of the best things about TikTok is it will help you find your people. One of the worst things about TikTok is it will help you find your people if your people are bad people, right? If you go looking for diverse viewpoints, TikTok will give it to you. If you go looking for an echo chamber of hate, TikTok will unfortunately give that to you as well. So it has to do with your intent. Sorry,
Yes. No.
I realized I hadn't jumped on that, and that's like key research finding.
Oh no, it's absolutely great. And Amanda posted, he goes, yeah, dude, you should make that a billboard, which kind of leads us into our last part of the show as we wind down. I always love to end the show with 3 questions that I love to ask all my guests.
Yes.
So, Eric, let's see if you are ready for question number 1. The question is, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
Um, testing, standardized testing, and everything that comes from the monopoly of curriculum, of certification, and quote unquote accountability that is all coming through mostly one company, Pearson. It is really, really bad news. The other part of EduKryptonite is anytime we other children and say, well, and we lower our expectations for what any kid deserves and is capable of, and when we treat accommodations as privileges, we have to stop doing that. And sorry, so on that note, gifted education is an accommodation, not a privilege. Accelerated learning is a need. It is not okay to make somebody sit around and wait before they can move on and learn more because of their age. Stop it. Do not badmouth gifted ed. Now, on that same note, constantly call out the ways in which gifted education programs have been used to reinforce white supremacy, and tell people to stop that nonsense and to make gifted programming inclusive and responsive to students' needs.
Love it. Great. Thank you so much for that awesome answer. There's so
Rant.
much there. No, but it's wonderful. It hits on so many great points, a great soundbite as we continue to promote the show, but thank you so much for sharing that. And then, yeah, Amanda, exactly. Please clip this. It will be clipped for sure. I tell you that much. All right, Eric, question number 2.
Yep.
And Amanda kind of alluded to it, but of course you can change it up. But if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Teach the student in front of you, not the student you planned for. Every time.
Love
Teach to
it.
the student in front of you, not the student that you planned for. I think that's the first thing. There's so many billboards I could make, but that's the one.
Oof, that one
That's
is
the
great.
dissertation. That's the
That's it.
dissertation billboard.
That's just a mic drop right there too. I mean, I love it. It's absolutely speaks volumes and it speaks loudly, and it's a great billboard, that's for sure. All right, and the last question, Eric. So let's say that this was the Let's Talk Ed Research podcast and you are the host and I am your guest. What would be one question you'd like to ask me?
Ooh, so I actually have a series of these for my column that I write, and I'm trying to pick. What is This is my thing. It's 2 questions actually. What is your absolute favorite thing about what you do, the work that you are currently doing? And what is the thing that you hate most? And I think the kryptonite is kind of the same question, but I would turn that back and say those are the 2 questions that I think that I always ask when I'm in a dialogue is like, what do you love? What gets you up in the morning? What's the passionate part of what you're doing? And then what is the thing what do you hate most about your chosen area of work and profession?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just the learning process. Like for me, since tech moves so fast, it's always waking up and seeing, okay, what is out there and doing my research, going through social media and seeing what is happening, finding trends, because eventually my job is I don't want us to fall behind to what is out there. As a matter of fact, I want us to move forward and just to continue to actually be leading the way, but at the same time, being very cautious, because one thing that I like is that, well, there's so much tech and we have been overloaded with tech where there's several platforms that duplicate efforts. And sometimes what happens is there's just one little button extra, and then it's like, boom, teachers just hop on that because they have that extra button, but it really does nothing for the pedagogy and the practice, really. And so my thing is, I always have to teach them, and this is a new mindset that was shared with me too, is really treat any platform as an instrument and a musical instrument. It takes time to practice and really dive in deep. At first, it's going to be hard. And then once you start building those melodies, you become very proficient in it. And then you can really see what that platform can do, rather than just say, I can't get that C chord. Let me hop onto saxophone. Maybe that's easier. And you know what? Let me hop onto this. And you're just hopping on and not really, is there really learning taking place? And then, of course, you as a teacher are learning another platform, students are learning another platform and a different login, and it just creates a whole mess. So that's one of the things too, that in my job, I have to, sometimes I feel like I'm the bad guy, and because teachers are like, oh, you won't let us do this or do this or do this. But as a district, what we've done is we've standardized on what platforms to use, because we really want the teachers to maximize on those. And now, of course, we're not saying don't use X, Y, or Z. You have that option, but these are the ones that we want to focus on to dive in deep. And then at the end of the year, what I love too now is we get feedback from teachers and say, okay, what worked for you? What didn't work for you? And what are some suggestions you have, so we can research and say, you know what? maybe they are right. Let's go ahead and
Hmm.
check this one out and take that feedback. So that's one of the things that this year has changed a lot, where now there's more of that open communication from our central office to teachers, and it just makes things so much easier. This year the tech rolled out and we didn't get as much fight back as we normally would, because we did those surveys, we did the research,
Yeah.
we had a small group of people vet the resources, and they're like, hey, these are pretty good. Now later on they may say, you know what, it looked good at first, we loved what it offered, but this and this are missing, and then we can go back and make some informed decisions and say, okay,
Yes.
let's see what's out there. And that is like, oh my gosh, like it just really excites me, because teachers are on board, we're connecting, and we have that conversation going back and forth. And ultimately the goal is we want successful students. And
Yeah.
for me, it's like a successful student, and this, I'm just speaking from my experience, a successful student has never been a behavior issue for me. If a student is successful, they've always just come in and they're willing to work and share. So I want my students to be successful. So I want those teachers to have successful students that are happy to come in and just really work together with the teachers. So I love that. So those are my things that I love about what I do.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that the idea that reciprocity, the sense of taking in information, what that creates is that sense of acting in good faith. You know, people assume that to listen to the student means that we're denying our own expertise, and it's not true. It allows us to create a relationship, a bond with that student in which they are going to trust and engage in good faith. And when people engage in good faith, everything's amazing. And I love how you point out that the way we see a student succeeding is a student who's engaged in good faith. It's not about did they hit XYZ. It's, are they acting and working in a positive direction? Are they are they internalizing that sense of ownership and capacity to learn? That's more important than any piece of information we could ever give them. And when students literally have 90% of human knowledge in their pocket, it's not about what we teach them, it's about how we teach them to learn.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much for that question. And I want to add Amanda's comment here again. It says, Eric, you're my kind of people. Thank you so much for your creative energy and spirited voice. Hashtag PLF, which stands for
Yes.
Professional Learning Family, or
Mhm.
Personal Learning Family, too. And then, of course, Play Matters. So thank you so
Yes,
much, Amanda,
play.
for your comments. I appreciate it. And again, Eric, you are definitely welcome back anytime you want to do another show.
Oh,
You
there's so
hit
much
me
more we
up.
can talk
Yeah,
about.
you definitely hit
So
me
much
up.
more.
We can make it happen. Maybe after your trip to Amsterdam, maybe come back on
Yeah,
and share your experience with us and how your research was received, and maybe some other
yeah,
ideas as to what to look out for. But this conversation could definitely continue to a
definitely.
part two, part three,
Thank you so
and
much.
we will definitely make that happen. I really appreciate you. And for all our audience members that caught us live or are going to catch the replay, thank you as always from the bottom of my heart for making my EdTech life what it is today. Please make sure you stop by our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and all the other 167 amazing episodes with educators and creators that are passionate about what they do. Where, like I mentioned earlier, where you can take a little bit of what they know and sprinkle it on to what you are already doing great. And if you'd love to contribute to our mission of our show, which is to connect educators and creators one show at a time, please make sure you stop by our merch store as well, where we've got sweaters, hoodies, we've got some nice caps here. We know conference season is around the corner and you want to dress comfortably. Hey, pick yourself up a sweater and again contribute to our mission. But as always, my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.